r/ask Reddit. What is the scariest thing you have ever experienced? In my old job, I used to cycle home from work along the country back roads just before midnight. There were no street lights along those roads, and I hated cycling on the main road because I was anxious about being in the way of traffic. I had an LED light that was fixed to the front of my bike, though. Anyway, I was on my way back home from work one night, and after turning a corner, my light shone on someone who was sitting with their legs crossed in the middle of the road. The guy was just sitting there in complete silence and darkness, by himself. I pulled on the brakes and stopped in front of him and asked if he was alright. He just looked at me and said that he trying to get to a location that was approximately 20 miles or so from where we currently were. I told him that, and he said that he knew and that he was waiting for someone else. Then he got up and walked off into one of the nearby fields without saying anything. I had another encounter with the same person a week later in the exact same spot. It honestly gave me the freaking creeps, especially when he said that he'd found who he was looking for. Turns out the guy was waiting for a specific car to drive that way. The owner of said car was someone he loved, but was with someone else, and he was planning to kidnap her. I found this out when I saw his face in one of the local newspapers not long after this incident. He'd been arrested for assault and attempted murder. Got caught in a riptide 200 yards offshore with all of my family, including my at the time 6-year-old little sister. We all made it out fine except my dad. He was so exhausted from carrying my sister that he was barely able to stay afloat. They had to send a rescue crew to get him. We all made it out alive, thank God. When I was in high school about 10 years ago, I was home alone while my mom went to pick up my brother, and before my mom left she told me to bring the dogs, and now we had 2 beagles, one that was friendly but barked loud, and an older one that we had gotten from the shelter was extremely protective and was not afraid to show his teeth. I ignored her and left them outside for a bit. I was in the back part of the house and was on the computer when I heard a noise. I walked to our front room and saw a young guy near the front door, who knocked. I stood slightly out of sight and saw him walk near our window and then back to the door and knocked again, but also tried the door. Immediately, my blood went cold, and I rushed to the back door and quietly yelled for the dogs to come in. They ran in and I herded them to the front room, and I heard the mailbox slot open. Right away my older beagle got on the defensive and growled, "I'm gonna bite you," growl, while the other one barked. I got my phone and called my mom and begged her to come back home, which she did with my brother. They looked around and saw no other signs of entry. I triple check every door now, and even though those 2 dogs have passed away, I keep our current dog near me when home alone. Let me preface this story with, I have a phobia of water I can't see the bottom of. r/thalassophobia for anyone wondering if they have the same thing. When I was younger, my brother was driving me home at night from a 4-H model railroading meeting. This was February in Indiana, and we were driving on country roads to get home. We came to a stop sign, and when my brother touched the brakes to slow down, the SUV we were in went sideways on black ice. In an attempt to save it, he overcorrected and we ended up in the slow-angle descent into a drainage ditch. When the driver's side tire went into the icy black water of the ditch, the truck slowly lurched onto the driver's side and then upside down into the water. Black freezing deck began rushing into the truck, and I nearly lost my mind. My brother put his hand on the ceiling and released his belt, and I tried to do the same, but being 5 years younger and in near panic, I couldn't get my buckle undone. So I had to use both hands and fell into a clump on the floor. We clambered to the back of the vehicle, and my brother began kicking the side window to no avail. At this point I had enough wherewithal to find a pair of my dad's needle-nose pliers and shatter the rear windshield so we could climb out. The water was only like 2 feet deep, but I didn't know that while I was upside down and water began rushing in through the door seals. I cut the crap out of my hand, shattering the rear window. The most important thing that happened that frigid night was that a jerk in a Camaro blew right past us while we were standing next to the road, and then a couple in a minivan pulled up to the stop sign a minute later and drove us all the way home. Like 30 minutes out of their way. I still stop anytime I see someone in need because of them. I was 21 working the overnight shift at a 24-hour pharmacy when a guy ran in with a ski mask and gun and robbed the store. He made me get on the ground and took my co-worker to all the registers and emptied them into bag, then ran out and jumped into a getaway car and drove off. Still had to finish my shift after that, too. He and his accomplices were arrested a couple weeks later, and he did 6 years in prison for armed robbery. I got a notification in the mail from the state when he was released. Gee, thanks. I choked on a piece of bacon that wasn't fully cooked, had to physically shove my hand to the back of my throat and yank it out cause it was so stuck. Coughing didn't work, and I was starting to see stars. It's been over a decade since, and I still don't eat bacon, unless it's borderline burnt. How damn this blew up. Cook your bacon properly, folks. I walked around to the next aisle, no sign of my mom. Kept wandering around the store, getting more and more panicked, trying to find my mom, but also trying to keep it together. Finally lost it, and started crying. Fast forward to the happy ending. One of the staff found me bawling my eyes out, a scared crying kid, trying to choke out that I can't find my mom. Must have been obvious. She took me upstairs to the manager's office. They announced over the in-store intercom system, and I had to describe to the concerned people what my mom had been wearing. We watched the in-store CCTV footage for any sign of my mom. I couldn't see her. Luckily I knew exactly what she was wearing. I can still recall that exact outfit to this day, and I'm 36 now. After about a minute my mom came around a corner, practically flew up those stairs, and claimed me. Turns out she'd been walking around the store, scared shitless, looking for me all over, but we kept missing each other. I swear when I was young my dad used to purposely try to lose me in stores. I would walk up to where he was looking at something on a shelf, or whatever, and I would get distracted also looking at something. Next thing I know I look over and he's gone. Minutes of panic searching later, and he was usually a couple aisles down or at the register paying, or something. It freaked me out every time. Me and 5 other people saw a monster while we were out camping. We were walking through a trail to get to the campsite, and we noticed a tall dark tree-sized something kinda swaying back and forth about 50 yards from us. We all turned around and ran immediately. Worst part is none of our parents believed us at the time. They didn't even question why we came home the first day, into what was supposed to be a 5-day camping trip. Midnight, it's dark out. Home alone. No pets. Mom out of state, so I locked the doors. Back deck door was open. The deck overlooked a cliff, essentially, so there's no way anyone could have come inside that way. I was watching TV all night, sitting on the couch downstairs. I went upstairs for some reason, but I was up there for a little while. All the lights were off and the TV stayed running. Again, I was home alone. When I walked downstairs some lights were on and the kitchen cabinets were open. I swear the TV sounded louder than before. I thought my mom came home, or something, but her car wasn't in the garage. At this point I was a little freaked out, so I called her, but she didn't answer. She was probably asleep already in Boston. I walked around the corner to see if the front door was open, and it was. I was spooked, but then the garage started opening. No car came, and I waited for a little to see, but no one came. I was sitting in the kitchen facing a closet that had jackets that looked like people, so I kept freaking myself out. After a bit I jumped in my seat from fear that someone was in the house and sprinted upstairs to my mom's room. I literally did not sleep that night or next night. Looking back I feel like it was ghosts because nothing happened after that. No sounds or anything. To my knowledge it wasn't robbery. I was 10. This is the reason I'm afraid of the dark. When I was about 5 years old or so, my mom took me grocery shopping with her. We accidentally got separated. I was a quiet child, prone to daydreaming. I remember bending down to look at some toys along the bottom shelf, in the same aisle as my mom. That was our rule, always had to maintain line of sight, not allowed to touch anything, or take things off shelves, without her say-so. When I looked back up, she was gone. I consider myself a rational person. Of course, most people would believe that of themselves, however objective they try to be. This is something that happened to me and a friend around 18 years ago. I was hanging out with him and his cousin in his new house. This was a somewhat busy area near to a major commercial center. At around 9 p.m. we decided to take a walk to a convenience store for food. His cousin decided to stay at the house. It took us 30 minutes to get to the store. There was a fair amount of vehicular and pedestrian traffic. On the way back we both started getting this really weird feeling. It's hard to describe now, but both of our experiences matched up when discussing it later on. It felt like the air was much lighter, thinner. The streets seemed somehow out of place. All of a sudden there were no cars or people around. Everything went as silent. This continued for a few minutes, and we both started walking faster. What freaks me out to this day and what I could never explain is this: both our watches stopped working. My digital and his analog. His watch stopped at 9:41 p.m. He was later able to get it fixed. Mine was dead for good. When we got back to the house, it was minutes to 11 and his cousin was freaking out. We were gone for an hour longer than we were meant to. There was no way we could have taken that long to get back. If anything, we walked faster than we did getting to the store. It's something I usually don't like thinking or talking about. Neither does my friend for that matter. I don't remember the exact term, but basically, pocket dimension.